This is Prince George's County Executive Rashawn Baker, and you're listening to the Maryland Crabs Podcast.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
It's the Maryland Crabs.
That was a dramatic opening.
I've been working on some stuff.
Like what?
Just ways to say it. I say it to the mirror in the morning when I'm brushing my teeth. My wife tells me to shut up.
You know, it took me a little bit with the Daily News Brief. I've got that whole thing now. I've got the date. This is John Frenay, and this is your
the dramatic
Daily. Yeah.
Plus, you're doing two podcasts now. I always loved when I worked in TV news, whenever we got a new reporter or a new anchor, because they would invariably screw up and throw out the call letters to their last gig. It always happened. And it was live TV, so there's nothing they could do for us. So we were always waiting for the first time it happened.
That was funny. Man, we got off topic there, didn't we?
Right off the bat.
It usually takes us a couple minutes to do that.
I've missed the last couple interviews because I've been busy, so you've been staying on topic, which is unusual.
Trying to, yeah. Yeah, it was funny. Well, we had County Executive Steve Shue last week, and I am really ticked off that my timing was off on that one because I should have had that interview a week later because literally 2 days after we recorded him, the letter broke for the county fairgrounds where he wrote a letter to DNR asking if the county would be able to take over the fairgrounds and asking the secretary, what are they called? Directors, secretaries? Secretary to basically to convey the property as, declare it a surplus on the state and give it to the county. And that just really reeked with sort of some collusion between them and the Bayhawks with the Bayhawks program. And we had a conversation before we started recording about that. And I decided not even to approach that just because he said, realistically, it's so far down the road. We need an act of Congress, literally, to get a new exit ramp off of an interstate highway, which is the least of the worries. Right. And then you've got all these other people that own bits and pieces of the property, getting them all together, getting the financing together. You've got a fairground that has a 99-year lease that's stuck in the middle of that. You've got another property that's laden with asbestos. And he said it's just nothing that's really going to happen really anytime soon. And we were kind of joked about it. I said, well, it's, maybe in your second term as governor or wherever your next step is. And we just sort of laughed at that. Now all of a sudden that letter came out. I was like, okay, I would have asked that. But
the lesson is that we never interview people when we're supposed to. Just when we schedule an interview, then let's just wait 2 months.
And then just show up. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll work out there. But yeah, no. So we heard from the county executive and what he plans to do for his campaign. We heard about what his priorities are if he were winning again. And we want to give equal time, which is something that we do. We gave equal time to everybody in the city elections and whatnot. And we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do on the other elections.
Yeah.
This week, we're heading over to Steuart Pittman, who is the Democratic candidate that's challenging County Executive Steve Shue for County Executive. We went over to his really cool farm out in Davidsonville, 500 acres.
I always know when someone's going to run because I get a friend request from somebody who I don't really know them at all. And then all of a sudden they friend request me on Facebook. And we have it says you have like 50, 60 mutual friends. It's all the politicos in town. Right. And I'm like, oh, you're running for something. And so for the last couple of days, I've gotten like 10 friend requests, and they're all people who are running for something or another.
See, that's funny. That's the difference in you and me. You accept all these friend requests. And I've gotten a lot more since we've started the podcast. And I just don't do it. My policy on Facebook is that if I have met you and face-to-face and we've interacted and whatnot, I will do it. But just these random...
Yeah, I don't care. I'm a little needier than you are.
Yeah, I don't need that. But we went out to Dodon Farm in Davidsonville. Not totally off the beaten path, but a little bit off the beaten path.
All of Davidsonville is off the beaten path.
Well, my gosh, this was just it's in a land preservation. Oh, we get into it a little bit, but it's 500 acres. He's a fascinating guy, really heavy into the horse industry. Got some good ideas for, how he wants to run his campaign, what he's doing. He thinks that Steve Shue is doing a bang-up job on the heroin thing.
Yeah.
But that's it. We had a really good time out talking with him. So why don't we pay some bills, and then we'll get back into it with candidate Steuart Pittman.
Just do it.
Did you know that more than 1,200 mental health patients had to be transferred last year by AAMC to facilities outside our area because these facilities do not exist right here in our own area? Denim and Diamonds is a fabulous, fun evening under the stars to support expanding mental health care in our community. AAMC Foundation proudly thanks RXNT for their generous $50,000 exclusive presenting sponsorship. Get more info at AAMCdenimanddiamonds.org.
Well, today we were on a road trip and we were invited way out into the deep, deep woods of Davidsonville. And I'm not even sure we're still in Maryland anymore, but we're on Dodon Farm here with County Executive candidate Steuart Pittman. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me here.
Well, you had me.
I had you. I live here.
Let's find out a little bit about Steuart Pittman. And you really came on the radar, I guess, probably about 4 months ago. And
your radar.
Certainly came out of the gate with your fundraising and everything else. But where did you come from? What was the desire to run for county executive?
Where did I come from? I was hiding in the backwoods down here in Davidsonville.
That's it.
Yeah.
For 8 generations, I read it.
Yeah. Well, I born here. Family's been here forever. But I went to school at the University of Chicago, and I spent 9 years away from here, doing community organizing in Chicago and then Iowa. I had that part of my life where I was working exclusively on engaging communities in local issues.
Okay, so tell me what a community organizer in Chicago and Iowa does.
That's a good question, because when I went for my first job interview, I had no idea what the answer to it was either. I'd just gotten out of college. They sent me out into the west side of Chicago and the south side of Chicago, knocking on doors and asking people what the issues were in their neighborhood. It's organizing neighborhood groups and signing people up as members, and then you get them together and they have a little community meeting, and then they start defining issues, and they go and they try to get local government to, it was often abandoned houses in the neighborhood that they needed to be boarded up simply or fixed up and rebuilt.
So then that group would go to like planning and zoning or whatever.
Yeah, their county council person.
Right.
A lot of police protection issues, usually it was about getting more police patrols in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Believe it or not, people, and these were low and modern income neighborhoods. So we weren't going into the higher income neighborhoods organizing for this work. I was actually in a public housing project on the south side of Chicago. It was actually the same one that Barack Obama was in a year after me. I never met the guy.
Really?
But he was organizing in the same place. So if I ever meet Barack Obama, we're gonna have some mutual friends from Altgeld Gardens that we'll talk about. But then I was out in Iowa, and in Iowa it was low income white African-American and Hispanic neighborhoods, and we were organizing in these different neighborhoods, and then they would all come together as part of the same organization, and so we would work on citywide issues as well. We got the head of the Carpenters Union elected as mayor.
Okay.
His mother was part of our organization, and everything from the utility commission on utility shutoffs in the winter and utility rates and jobs. There were urban development action grants where developers had gotten grants to go downtown and hire local people, and we were holding them accountable and saying, hire local people, we need the jobs. So it was local neighborhood issues, the same kinds of things that come before a county council, and just working from the outside, not the inside.
Okay, so you're out of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
You say, hey, I want to go back to the farm. And by the way, this is a beautiful farm.
Thank you.
This is, and you were telling me before we started that it's about 500 acres.
Yep.
Is this preserved in an easement or a? It
is. My father was very interested in preserving open space and the environment, and he worked with Virginia Claggett for years on trying to preserve parts of the county. And so this farm is under an agricultural preservation program, and we also have a trust. There are 7 siblings, and we have a trust that prevents us from selling anything without 5 of the 7 agreeing to it. So it's very unlikely that we would ever sell it. We were all trained by my father.
Okay.
To believe
sounds like you set up a city council here.
Land is not money. Don't think of this as something you can cash out on. Think of this as something that you pass on to the next generation. So that's goes deep in my psyche.
Well, it's a beautiful farm, and what are you doing on the farm? What does this farm actually do? I mean, I know I've got a friend of mine that's a grain and corn farmer out in Nebraska. So
yeah. It's hard to make money on grain in this area. You have to have a combine, and you have to then farm lots of land in other people's farms. So a lot of the large farmers do that. This was tobacco country, so it's split up into smaller fields. You'll notice we don't have these vast expanses like you do in other counties. And we all have neighbors near our farms, so the development has been around the farms. So we have to be good neighbors. But it was tobacco long ago. When I was a child, it was tobacco. Then it was beef cattle. And when my daughter was born in Iowa, I decided that we needed babysitters and we needed to be closer to home, and I wanted to raise my daughter around family. So we came back, and I wanted to figure out a way to make a living on the farm because making it commercially viable helps to preserve it. And I always felt an attachment to the land and the farm. And I had grown up with horses when I was younger, and that had, as a teenager, grounded me. And it was hard for me to completely get away from the horses. I don't think I sat on a horse for 9 years when I was away because I knew if I did that I would be addicted and I would have to.
Are you an equestrian?
That's one word. That's the fancy word for it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a horse trainer. I work with young horses, train them, and then either sell them or train them for other people.
Are we training for shows or are we training for races?
3-day eventing is the sport that I've been most involved in with the cross-country jumping.
My sister used to do the Radnor one up in Pennsylvania
all
the time.
I've been there. Yeah. In fact, I got a dog up there. But anyway, that's a whole nother story.
Right, okay.
So it took a while to be able to get to the point where I could make a living training horses. And it was race horses mostly, the ex-race horses that we would get. So that's a whole other part of my story. I spent the last 7 years building an organization, a nonprofit called the Retired Racehorse Project. And we can talk about that as we get it. So the work on the farm, to me, was growing hay for the horses, which is the hardest work you can do in the heat of the summer. And we bred horses for a while, but now it's training for other people. And then my sister and brother-in-law came in and started working the farm as well, and they're growing grapes and making wine. So it's become...
So we can come here and drink soon?
You can. Vineyards at Dodon.
When are they? Is that open?
It's not a public facility, but they have events. It's a wine club. It's like a CSA for agriculture where you join a club, and then each year it's like the Columbia Record and Tape Club. Remember that?
Right. So I can get in for $1.99.
Right, and
$13.
And then you have to buy a lot of records or wine. Yeah, and it's good wine.
I think it's very cool that we've got several wineries that have opened up in the last, I'm going to say 10 years here in Anne Arundel County. We've got Great Frogs down in Annapolis. We've got Thanksgiving, which I've not been to, up here in Harwood. Yeah. Around the corner from here in Harwood, I guess. And then now we've got this. And I think those are the three that are in Anne Arundel. And there's many that are in the Maryland wine trail.
It was Thanksgiving's wine that convinced my sister and brother-in-law that you can make good wine in this area because the soils over there, which is nearby, are very similar to the soils here. And a lot of it does have to do with the soils. And then you have to invest everything that you can in doing everything right. It's complex. I don't even try to to understand it all.
It's definitely a scientific art to doing that. You're back here. You're figuring out how to make some money on the farm. You're working with the horses. You're training horses. You're growing hay for the horses. Yeah. And you woke up one morning, you got a really bad cup of coffee and said, I think I want to run for county executive.
Yeah, I did a few things in addition to just working with the horses. I was never able to pull myself away from politics and advocacy. And so I was, of course, president of the Maryland Horse Council for 2 years, where I spent a lot of time lobbying the folks up in Annapolis for this, that, and the other. Got involved in the Anne Arundel County Farm Bureau. And that's where I really spent a lot of time working with the county government on mostly efforts to deregulate and get government off the farms. Some people might think that makes me a Republican, but no, I'm a Democrat. But we had to get building permits for a little shed. I mean, I built a little shed out here for my daughter's pony. I was very proud of it. With 2x4s and it's still standing.
You're not a builder.
But I didn't realize at the time I was breaking the law because you actually had to get a building permit from the inspections and permits to be able to build anything on a farm. So we worked for a long time to get a bill passed to exempt ag buildings from those kinds of permits. And some of the same things with some of the grading that we do on farms that's really an ag practice. So I was a real advocate on farmers' issues working with the county. So that brought me to a place. And then I became part of the Soil Conservation District, which most people don't know exists. But it's the Anne Arundel County. There's one in every county. It's where the best management practices that clean up the bay and clean up our water come through. So whether we have nutrient management plans so that we don't put too much phosphorus and too much nitrogen on the soil. We have programs to prevent erosion on farms. And then the Soil Conservation District also regulates developers to make sure that when they do construction, that all the dirt doesn't end up in the stream.
Yeah, we've got some runoff controls and whatnot. Right.
So I jumped on board with that as a farmer, a representative of farmers for that. And all of those things kept me involved and made it so that when I started thinking about running for office, which I swore I would never do, I really never intended to for a long time. Being on the outside is more fun in some ways.
We're going to check with you on November 8th and see whether see how you think whether you'd want to do it again or not.
Yeah. But here I am.
Your history in the county predates ever having a county executive.
Right.
Certainly your family's history does. Obviously, you're running because you think you can do a better job and that our county executive is falling down in certain ways. What ways are they?
The biggest thing is I thought it was a development issue for South County at first, but I found out that it's a countywide issue, that the development interests have really taken control of county government. And so that the planning for the future I see coming from top-down developers as opposed to community-driven, the way it has been in some other counties and the way it actually was in this county for a while. And in working on some of these issues, I've seen that it's fiscally irresponsible in a lot of cases. If you let the developers call the shots about what their impact fees are going to be and what they're going to have to pay to hook up their sewer and their water, you end up allowing development to happen, often in places that it shouldn't happen, that shouldn't get paved over, and without the infrastructure. So you end up with the overcrowded schools, and you end up with a future debt for the county, financial problem.
I know.
So that's where I'm coming from.
Well, I personally, I'm a fan of infill development, where you've got,
Me too.
again, you've got the infrastructure to a point to do it. I know the Eastport Landing, and everyone hates me because I support that, but I think I think that makes sense.
No, I agree with you.
To do it there as opposed to perhaps going out to Crystal Spring. Now, Crystal Spring certainly is going to be developed at some point, and it's going to. It's not going to probably be what we think it is today, as just as everything. But
when I was knocking on doors in Chicago, development was everything. Trying to get somebody to do some development in a neighborhood. We're in a totally, there were no grocery stores. There were abandoned houses. Wouldn't it be nice if somebody came in and was willing to invest in a community that needed it? But in Anne Arundel County, we're in an amazingly strong position with respect to developers. They want to be here. We've got the most beautiful land. We've got the water. We've got a great economy. We've got all the investment at Fort Meade and the
our location to D.C. and Baltimore.
Yeah, it's great. So they want to be here. And so we're in a position of strength. When they come and they say they want to build, we can say, well, you can't go here, but you can go here, and here's the fees you're going to have to pay, and we can be tough. We can make sure that the citizens of the county are getting some benefit from it. And that's where I feel that not just the current county executive, but some recent ones before him as well, have allowed these development interests to really call the shots.
Well, I remember way back when Janet Owens was here in the effigy with the Walmart and and everything else down in South County. People down in South County, just south of 214, they're very particular about what comes in down here. I know it's a very different world. And South County is very rural, and we do have other pockets of rurality. I'll make that word up. We've got up the Papa John's farm that the
small
county,
and shrinking, right?
The Papa John's farm that just did. The county is. I think they've entered into an agreement. I don't know whether they actually bought it for a future high school.
Yeah.
I know that area has some pretty nice farm area, and certainly we can't get away with that without talking about Crownsville and what's going on right now with the Bayhawks.
Yeah.
Or potentially with the Bayhawks.
I'll talk about that all day long.
Let's talk about that. Certainly, I think that, as far as the fairgrounds go, I think that it's the fairgrounds could use an upgrade, and I think that would be provided that the fairgrounds could continue on and everything else would be a boon for them. But again, I think they're talking about 20
ball fields,
intramural type fields, a small
hotel,
stadium,
restaurants, $190 million they're talking about, and of course the stadium and an amphitheater. So it's a huge project. And I was at the Baldwin Hall when the Bayhawks team was there to present their plan, and they had their maps and they had their plan. And the place was packed, standing room only, barely enough of that. People were upset. And the reason that they were upset is because they hadn't heard anything about this. And they envisioned, and I think correctly so, they envisioned a lot of traffic, a lot more than they have now, a plan that was not compliant with the small area plan that they had developed 17 years ago that said that they wanted to remain.
And that's the general highway area improvement plan, or general highway
it's
corridor
actually
improvement
Crownsville
plan.
itself. There's 16 of them, and they were done in the early 2000s under Janet Owens, early in her administration. And those were plans that were developed over a 2-year period by neighborhoods and communities and local leaders with planning department. They're coming to the end of their 20 years, their 20-year plans.
Okay.
So the county has pretty much ignored them. The developers don't particularly like being told that the community didn't want to do something and therefore they can't do it. So they've not been very visible. They've not been looked at. And it's really time to look at those and look at the specific recommendations that they made. And before we even do a general development plan for the next 10 years, that we need to look at where we stand on the plans that the communities came up with. So that's just one example of a community that had a plan that said, we want to keep green space. We want to remain RA zone in a lot of the area, rural, agricultural. There's not a lot of agriculture up there, but it's a quiet community.
Sure.
Not a lot, more traffic than it used to. But so people didn't like the fact that there was this proposal that was presented to them, $190 million proposal. It would have been it would have a new exit off of 97. It would change the nature of their community, and they were pretty outraged by it. And then they were particularly outraged when the developer was there with county staff. Top county staff were there as well, because they'd been working on this project together for the previous months. And the developer actually said that this was, I don't know why everybody's so upset, this is your county executive's vision here. So, Steve Shue has not come out publicly on where he stands on the Bayhawks proposal, but nobody doubts that county government has been involved, but the community has not. So there was
a letter that the Capitol had published where the county executive had asked DNR, who actually owns the fairgrounds, which is a critical component of this larger project.
Yeah, that's where a lot of it goes.
For those that are listening that aren't familiar, this is the state hospital, which is on, I guess it's Crownsville Road. It's on, if you're coming off of General's Highway, it's on the right side, which is like a couple hundred acres, I think.
It's 900 acres, that Crownsville site. Yeah, not even including Bacon Ridge, which is the preserved area.
Is the wooded area. And then you've got the fairgrounds on the left side.
Yeah.
And actually, this will tie in eventually to the Eisenhower Golf Course, which the county just acquired from the city.
Yeah, there's a lot of green space that's all almost connected. Yeah.
And there was a letter that came out that DNR owns the fairground for the state, and there was a letter where the county executive had asked them to convey that property over to the county, which seems like it could be a precursor to working out the deal with the Bayhawks.
To something, could be. So the fairgrounds is run by a fair board, which is volunteers, and a lot of them are local farmers because it's an agricultural fair. And so the 4-H groups and the kids, they bring their goats and their sheep and every kind of animal you can imagine. They get judged, and then they got
put it on your calendar. September. It's an awesome. It's a fun fair.
Great. My kids love it. You can stick your fingers and let the little chickens bite them, and it's and most counties have a county fair. Ours really truly is still an agricultural fair. So the fair board was quite upset about this proposal because they had not been talked to about it. There was one meeting where they were told 2 of them could attend, but no more, a little bit before this big community meeting. And the night of the big community meeting, the fair board was there with a lot of the young people saying, save our fair from the Bayhawks. Now the Bayhawks are saying, well, we're gonna allow the fair to continue, but we're just going to redevelop it all, and then it'll be much more modern and a different kind of a fair. So then when this letter came out just a couple of days ago that the county executive had asked DNR if they were interested in selling them the property, without talking to the fair board about the letter, that was just, to me, another example of, that's bad governance to me. You don't talk about selling a piece of property out from under a bunch of volunteers that are running our county fair without talking to them first. To me, that's just not the way you govern. I mean, a lot of these projects can go through. I almost feel bad for the Bayhawks because they put a lot of money into this before ever connecting with the community and finding out what they think. So I think it would have been wise for the county executive at the very start to say, let's sit down with the fair board, let's sit down with some of these community groups and talk about what they can live with and what they can't.
And then move from there.
Yeah, maybe compromise, maybe.
I think it's funny in this day and age of, everyone says they want transparency and everything else. And there are no secrets anymore. Okay, if you kicked a kitten behind the barn 8 years ago, we're gonna find out about it. I've often said if I ever run for office, I'm going to throw out my first negative mailer. It'll be all on me. And it was like, okay, I smoked, I inhaled it, I liked it, I sniffed it one time, I didn't like it, never did it again. It was
right. Well, but transparency really does matter. I mean, there are people who are trying to. In fact, we're trying to get a better handle on how much development there's been in the county in recent years, where it's happening, and you can figure that out once it's already happened. But a lot of the applications are on paper. There's no reason other counties have this stuff online where you can really sort through and see what's going on. And it's really important for people out to track that. There's zoning variances, and then there are modifications that don't even go before the zoning board, where developers get something that wasn't in the law, that get an exception made. And it's really hard to track that stuff because it's not online where you can see it.
Well, that's I don't know whose fault that is. It's funny. I mean, you sit there and say the government should be able to do it. I in Annapolis in the city, I always said the aldermen, they should be sending out.
The Capitol blamed it on Leopold, and then Leopold wrote a letter saying, "Well, it's not my fault." So
right.
everybody's going to say, yeah.
You're pointing the finger someplace else.
Yeah.
I do know that when County Executive Leopold was in, it was the technology and the ability to technologically be transparent was very, very thin.
Yeah.
And I know Laura Newman, when she was in, had made some significant strides. And I know County Executive Hsu has really made some strides on that.
Sure. And we got to keep working on that.
Yeah. I was checking out your website, which is Pittman for People.
Yeah. I started out with Steuart Pittman Jr. I have a distant cousin who's an artist, and his name is Steuart Pittman, and his website is steuartpittman.com. And I didn't want people to go to that and see all this modern art up there. Like
we're electing some artist to run the county.
Right. I mean, he's a great artist and all, but that wasn't me. So, and nobody can spell my first name, so we switched it to Pittman for People.
Okay, and that is PITTMAN.
Yep.
FOR people.com.
Right.
Thank
you for pitching that.
Yep. Yeah, well, no. I mean, people need to know about you. I mean, they're going to be voting for you, so they need to know where the hell to learn about you. And I was on the website, and you really have three main prongs to your campaign. You've got growth, which we've talked about a little bit here so far. I forget what your title is, but I'm going to say livability for the people in the county, whether it be wages, jobs, services,
right,
and fiscal discipline. Mm-hmm. We've talked about growth a little bit. We are a fairly high-earning county. We're not the wealthiest, but in the state by any means. But I think we're good. Where are we falling down as far as livability stuff in the county, and where do you see your administration moving it?
I'm nervous about what's happened in the last few years with our teachers, our firefighters, and our police. That they were getting paid pretty close to what the folks in Howard and Prince George's County were getting paid, and recently they've dropped off. And the result is that everybody says we need more police officers, and we've got a training academy, and we're recruiting as fast as we can, but we're losing them, and we're not adding. We have the same number or a little less than we had when this county executive came in. We have basically the same number of police officers trying to serve this county that we had when our population was, 75, 100,000 people less. So clearly that's a problem. And it doesn't make sense for us to be recruiting, training, and then having them leave and go work in another county. So
right. I mean, the Christmas cards from the neighboring counties only go so far. Hey, thanks for the...
So that'll just get worse and worse and worse if we don't address it. And then on the teacher front, it's not only a question of what the teachers get paid and being able to keep them, but it's a question of how many there are, given the growth in students. So we have more young people coming in than we have overall. I mean, we're only growing by about 1% population a year, but our student population is growing faster than that. So as we all know, we have teachers who are having to teach 40 kids in a class, and we have mobile classrooms. And part of that, part of the mobile classrooms thing is a school construction issue. But separate from that is what we're actually spending on education in the operating budget. So the fact that we're 400 teachers short is, to me, something that needs to be addressed. And then the firefighters have a similar situation. And so it's a fiscal issue. There's no question about that. But we've got to make a plan.
Okay, so you're primarily looking at I'll say public service wages to make them competitive with. No, I mean, if we want to be the best county in Maryland, we've got to be able to attract the best people.
Yeah, I mean, we will. If we don't have good schools, we will start losing people. We will, we'll suffer from it. And same with public safety. But those are just three groups that actually get paid out of the county budget. So,
what's your thoughts on an elected school board, which we're heading to?
I think that's fine. I think that's good. Okay. And an extension of that is what's my thoughts about the role of the county executive versus the school board, and whether the county executive should have more power. And I actually don't think that the county executive should. I know it's embarrassing when you're county executive and the school board comes up with a budget that's more than you've got, more money than you've got, right. And you have to say no to stuff, and that's
and you're the bad guy.
You're the bad guy, right? But I think that's appropriate. I think we need the school board is an institution in itself, and it should be able to create a budget of what its needs are.
come from Pennsylvania originally, and they have two separate taxing authorities. They've got the local municipality as well as the school board, and you get two tax bills. And
two separate times, right?
And the school board does it. They're their own. If they need more money, they go to the state. They get a tax increase, and they roll with it, and they've got to make what it is. And there's none of the fighting back and forth between the county executives sitting there saying, okay, well, I need to slide this or appease this constituency, and so on and so forth.
The fighting is uncomfortable, but I'm not sure it's unhealthy. I think it's okay for the county executive's job to be difficult and to have to compete with all these interests, and that's why the county executive then needs to make sure they govern in a way where everybody's aware of where their money's being spent, part of the process, budget hearings. That one of the things that people forget quickly, but remember in 2016 on the ballot, there was that charter amendment that said that the county executive has to have at least 2 public hearings before the budget is presented. Yeah, that was introduced by Andrew Pruski on the county council. The county executive was opposed to it because he said, well, they're tying my hands and telling me how to do my job. But I think that kind of thing is important. And I think that it should go way beyond 2 hearings. I think that if people are engaged in a process where they're talking about all the different parts of the budget, and how much things cost, and where the money's going, and where the money's coming from, which is the revenue side that nobody wants to talk about in politics, it's a healthier system. It's time consuming and it's ugly, but it works better in the long run.
But it's necessary. You feel it's necessary? No, I tend to agree with that, and unfortunately, I think that people get engaged every 4 years. Really close to November.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately. And they don't see what is happening almost until it's too late.
Yeah.
You look down when you're looking at the ballot. I mean, and the wordings and everything else is so confusing. And it's like, okay, this sounds good to me. And I wonder how accurate some of the questions that we see on the ballots are and everything else.
That whole engagement thing, though, is really dear to my heart. And you can't force people to spend their time following politics. You just can't. But when
takes a special kind of geek to do that.
Yeah, but when there's something local and they feel like they have an impact, they do get engaged. And so, my idea as a longtime ex-community organizer is that the smartest thing that somebody who's leading in government can do is to figure out ways of engaging. I think Gavin Buckley in Annapolis has got this right, and I think he's already brought in people to government locally. Will Rowell and that are going to be engaging people and getting people onto boards and commissions and keep. It's a struggle, but to the extent that it works, government works better.
I'm proud of my call on that election because I was the only one that way back when I said Gavin's going to take John Astle.
Did you?
And I will say that I had no idea that he was going to take him by the numbers that he did, nor did I think it was going to be quite the runaway against Mayor Panelides. I did think Gavin was going to win it, but I thought it would be a little bit less than what Mike won it last time.
Yeah.
I thought it would be very, very tight, but it wasn't.
Yeah. But the energy out of that campaign, that was really, grassroots activism.
Oh, it totally was. And you have brought on Gavin's former campaign manager. And
Scott Travers.
I think the first time we met was actually at Gavin's inauguration. And I think I saw Scott Travers in the Ram's Head changing T-shirts from a Buckley to a Pittman T-shirt.
Right. And I hadn't even met Scott at that point, but here he is.
Are you looking to run a similar campaign?
Can't. I wish we could. I wish Anne Arundel County was as small that there were that few voters and we could talk to each one of them 3 or 4 times. We can't because it's a much bigger. I think Annapolis is about 1/14 the size of the county. Yeah, 580 people. But what we can do is our own little version of that is to work community by community by community. So our field work is going to be. This is actually this is a. First time this has been in the news, by the way. This is a breaking story, I'm telling you.
Okay.
So, we're going to be going community by community, and it happens to be that the 16 small areas are communities that have, they have a vision. They're coming to the end of their 20-year plan. So we're going to be working those neighborhoods and holding community meetings in each one, and that's going to be part of our campaign strategy. So people understand that this is a campaign about local issues. It's a campaign about things that they can have an impact on. And then when we have all that information from that process, when I become county executive in January, it's right at the time that the general development plan is going to be starting to be written. It'll be done by the end of the year, and then we can impact that plan.
Well, your campaign, recently we had the campaign finance reports that were due about 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. Mm-hmm. And you surprised a lot of people.
Did I?
You raised over $100,000. I know I subscribed to your mailing list, and there was the big push at the very end. It was like, come on, we've got 24 hours or whatever, which everybody does. I mean, that's just a standard.
We actually didn't plan to have to do that. Well, first I wasn't so sure we'd get there, and then during that week, it was mostly done by email to people who were my contacts and connections, and most of whom had never given to politics before, which was exciting. But then I thought we were going to make it on that last day. And I picked up a check, and it wasn't as much as I thought. I thought this person was going to max out. And no. So there we were, like $3,000 or $4,000 short. And that's when that last e-blast went out and said, we're almost there.
Right.
And then that put us over the top. We ended up at 103.
And I had mentioned it when I spoke with the county executive last week, and it certainly was evidenced in the Annapolis race. $1 million, which is what he's got in the bank pretty much right now, is not a guarantee that he's going to win this race. And I think he realizes that as well too, because he had said that Mike Pantelidis could add $100 million and he wasn't going to win that race.
Yeah,
obviously you do need money to run. Your fundraising appears to be out of the gate very, very solid, very, very grassroots. One of your supporters, but one of your bases of support is a lot of these. And they probably will hate me for calling them this, but the spinoffs of the Women's March that was in Washington, D.C. last January when Trump was elected. And that was essentially a protest against President Trump as well as a empowerment of women. We recently had one in Annapolis City. And, I mean, you've got the Indivisibles, the Resists, the Wise, the Surges, and whatnot, seemingly all behind you. I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. For anybody that's working.
I think so too.
How did you recruit these folks? Did they find you? Are they just looking for change?
I wasn't at the Women's March. I didn't meet them there. I would have been at the Women's March, but I was out of town. I think all of my sisters, I have 5 sisters, by the way. And,
I'm sorry.
No, it's good. They set me straight. And most of my family were there. We had a whole bunch of people staying in our house who were in from out of town. It was a big deal, and it was about dignity, civility, and politics. It was about a lot of things that I believe in. And so, no, I did not go out and recruit among those groups. And you're right that there are a lot of them, and they're very, very engaged. And it's always like this in politics. There are groups that engage and groups that don't. I've met with some of them. I expect them to be holding events and engaging. What I hear from most of them is, what can we do? Because most of them are new to politics. They're not the old hacks that have been at this for decades. They're people who weren't involved in politics before. So now there's an election that they can get involved in. And the questions are, what can we do? And some of it is basic rules and when things happen, but they want to door knock. They want to put out flyers. They want to make phone calls. They want to get engaged. So I don't know how big of an impact that's going to make, but it's certainly what makes for good politics is when new people get engaged.
I personally think it'll be a very significant impact. Just looking at the numbers that came into Washington last year, you look at the numbers that came into Annapolis 2 weeks ago. And as I look, I've got a spreadsheet at home which lists all the different races and the candidates I've got question marks on the ones that I think are coming in or that I've heard are coming in and everything else. But to look at some of the fresh names that are coming in, and I will count Steuart Pittman among them. Yep. Nobody heard of you a year ago.
Yeah.
Because you live back here in this farm off of this little hidden road, and unless you had a drone, you probably never even knew you existed. And you're not dissimilar from many people that are running.
Right. And I think we can thank Donald Trump for that. He's a very different kind of a president than we've ever had before, and people have engaged who weren't engaged before and felt like we have to do whatever we can do to make this country a better place and to keep our democracy strong and our communities as well. And it starts at the community level. So, my wife told me before that she would divorce me if I ever ran for office. And the day after the Trump election, she changed her mind.
It's funny. My uncle was in Reagan's cabinet way back when, and we had a Thanksgiving dinner with Colin Powell and his wife, Alma Powell.
Oh, neat.
Just on his farm up in Pennsylvania. And the conversation just came up and said, hey, General Powell, would you ever think about running for president? And Alma just said, let me get in here. The answer is no. And it was a different time. This is in the early 1980s. She says, because I refuse to live the rest of my life to be known as the widow of the first black president.
Wow.
And it was just such a powerful statement to me to see that. And it's so cool to see how far we've come. And that's in large part due to the people that have decided to get involved. It frustrates me that, my gosh, whether the bulldozers are running over your house or whether those drug dealers or, whatever it may be, people seem to lose sight of the larger important pictures. And that's my personal frustration. And I think that's very exciting to see new faces. In the school board that are running for election to the school board, running to the appointment that's going on right now.
Yeah. And I agree with you that the candidates are they're new, and I find their level of competence very high. I mean, we've got candidates who have worked in policy all their lives, who've been lawyers, who've been teachers, who've been all kinds of different jobs. But when you sit down and talk to them, and I hope you sit down and talk to a lot of them, county council candidates in particular, I'm thinking of, that you'll be impressed. I hope that when, not to be too partisan about all this, because I actually don't think that local politics should be all that partisan. I mean, the issues are not the same as federal issues.
No, they're not.
And I know Republicans who are more about smart growth than Democrats, and it goes the whole gamut. But I do think that given the way things are going, that if we had a majority of the county council flip to Democrat and a county executive who was a Democrat, that we could do things in this county that the Republicans who have been running it have not allowed. And we have a strange situation in the Republican Party here too, as you know.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got 4 county council members, one of whom is Steve Shue's nemesis. So Jerry Walker and Steve Shue don't usually agree on much. And then Steve Shue accuses Jerry Walker of being like a Democrat because he crossed party lines, and you should never do that. And then we've got Michael Prutka, whose political philosophy and his institute on the Constitution is a little bit out of the mainstream, to put it mildly.
That's a nice thing. Although I've heard from several people, Democrats and Republicans on the council, that he's a very thoughtful, engaged, very measured type of a person on the council. He
does have that. I've watched him on the county council too, and he is a very measured. He's a lawyer. I mean, and he's well trained, and he's been going around the country.
We shouldn't hold that against him. I'm dating a lawyer, so I've got that's my disclaimer that I got to throw out all the time.
But lawyers are careful about what they say, and he's gone around the country, and he's been doing these classes training people in his political philosophy, which is pretty much that we don't have to comply with laws that we don't think were in the Bible. So it's out of the mainstream. But he comes across that way. But when it comes down to voting, he didn't vote for anything for public education because they don't believe in public education. He doesn't vote for anything where the federal government's involved. Even if we're getting a grant from the federal government that we desperately need, he's going to vote against it because that's his political philosophy. And then his history, of course, is extremely divisive.
Right. Well, my prediction is that he'll retain that seat.
You think so?
Yes, I do.
All right,
We'll see.
You're on.
Bet you $1.
I believe he's going to lose it. Dawn Myers is going to win.
Okay, I'll bet you $1.
She's one of the candidates that I was telling you about. Is really
right. You've got Dawn Myers, and I'm trying to remember who else on the Republican.
He's got a
side
Republican opposition as well. I think there's a pretty good chance he'll win in the primary. He's got a lot of money behind him.
It's a weird district. I bet she keeps it. We got $1 on this
All right,
one. Okay,
$1. Okay.
And we got to bet 500 acres. I don't have it, but all that.
I don't know that you want it.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. It looks like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Opioids. The drug problem that we've got. We hear about it time and time again. The county just relaunched a DARE program, which was arguably a failure at one point. Maybe it's going to succeed at this point. Do you have any thoughts as far as how to combat that? It's not going away before November. It's not going to go away before your 4 or 8 years in office should you win. What do we do? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I actually think that what Steve Shue is doing is excellent. The safe stations were a great idea that the chief of police came up with and they're implementing, and that's really important to have a place for people to go. I do think that we have a shortage of treatment beds, and everybody acknowledges that. There's no money being invested in that, and we've got to come up with a place to find the money to invest in that. It's sort of a sad statement when they half joke about the fact that you can get treatment in jail, but you can't get it on the outside. I mean, that's sad. And fortunately, nobody is suggesting that we should put people in jail because they're addicted, but outside jail, it's really hard to find treatment. So Hopefully, there will be. I mean, a lot of this is outside our control. I mean, the fentanyl that gets put into the heroin, and and the people end up on heroin because it's cheaper than the opioids that their doctor prescribed.
Right.
That got them addicted in the first place. You know, it would be great if we can figure out how to stop that fentanyl coming in from China and killing people. And that's hard for a county executive to do. But I completely agree with what the county executive's doing in terms of, you know, going after the doctors, going after who are overprescribing, going after dealers with law enforcement, and doing lawsuits against the companies that manufacture the stuff, joining in with other counties and states that are participating in those lawsuits.
I was reading an article about I don't remember what town it was, but there was some little, I think it was in Ohio, it was some little tiny, it was like the town of Birdsville. Okay.
It doesn't really exist.
It's a small town.
Yeah.
But a manufacturer was shipping something like tens of thousands of pills to 2 pharmacies in this little town over a week's period. Yeah. And they've come down on them and everything else. And I think that's certainly a way to go. One other big of the talking points is the whole immigration thing, the illegal aliens or new citizens, whatever O'Malley had called them and whatnot. Uh-huh. And County Executive Shue has instituted a program working, and it's got a number, and I forget.
287G.
287G, where it's sort of a 2-pronged approach where they're identifying existing inmates within the county facilities that may potentially be illegal aliens or here not undocumented aliens, and they're going to refer them to ICE to do whatever they do. And they've also got an unused portion of the jail that they are using where ICE can sort of come in and drop off a prisoner. Is that something that you would retain?
No.
Reverse?
And here's why. I would seek to get out of that contract. Very few counties have entered into this contract with ICE. Some have. 2 parts of it that really upset me. One is that you can be brought in and be innocent and still get taken away. They'll still detain you. So they don't wait until you're convicted of a crime to decide that you should be. And
which part of that is this? Which is this on the
not the holding pen, but the part where they actually interview you.
Okay.
And they try to determine whether you might be illegal, and then they call ICE. So they do that with everybody who comes in. They don't wait until you're convicted. Okay. So to me, that violates our whole principle of innocent until proven guilty. But there's a fear among people who are immigrants about police because
undoubtedly.
Yes, and I think that this program contributes to that fear, and that fear is not constructive. I wouldn't want to be a police officer in a community where people feared me. And the other part of it, though, that I feel very strongly about is that the reason that we have this problem is that Congress has failed to act on immigration. So, Ronald Reagan, John McCain, reasonable, compassionate Republicans, or whatever you want to call them, all felt that the best way to deal with the problem that we have is to have a path to citizenship for folks who are here and are working and are good citizens and they're paying taxes. These folks do pay taxes. And that helps employers, too, who depend on these workers. And reform the laws at the same time so we have rules that make sense. And strengthen the border. I mean, enforce the rules once we have decent rules, but we don't have decent rules. Right. So as a result, we've got employers who provide jobs and workers who need jobs, and they come together and they make our economy work. Sure. They're doing the dishes in the restaurants. They're doing all the landscaping in our lawns. Right. And
all the stuff that people like to say we don't like to do.
So we've got this mess that was created by Congress's inability to act. And then you have a president come in who thinks that it's politically expedient to be very aggressive, and ICE becomes very aggressive in their raids, and they've promised us that they're going to quadruple the number of raids that they've done last year, and it was already more than has ever been done. So the fear by employers, the fear by immigrants, the fear by a lot of people of ICE as an unreasonable entity that's coming in is justified. And I think that I'm not saying we should be a sanctuary county necessarily, because that invites ICE to come in, and then you end up in a real mess, and then you end up hurting the people you were trying to help. But I don't believe that participating in a program like 287G is benefiting anybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I've gone through my list here. I think you've opened my eyes. I mean, I really enjoy talking to candidates for the podcast because I come November, I tend to be like the most informed voter of the pack. I think you don't have a primary challenger at this point. We do have a few more weeks to go before that.
Anybody out there want to join me?
So
no, please no.
It's that bad cup of coffee when you wake up.
There's no. If there is anybody, they're being very quiet, and usually people are not quiet before they file.
No, you'll hear you'd
yeah.
hear a little bit, and I've not heard anything.
Right.
I've not even heard anything that's seriously challenging county executive show. John Grasso has made some bloviations.
Yeah, that's a big question mark, isn't it?
That's whether he is or not. That'd be interesting to see how that goes.
Yep.
But Pittman4people.com is where you can find out a little bit more about Steuart Pittman. He spells it a little bit differently, Steuart.
You don't have to know how to spell it to find it, though.
That is true. You've certainly got your work cut out for you. I think
it is. It's a big job, a lot of work to do.
It's a big county. And as you mentioned, this is a great place to live. This is sort of tying into county executive shoes, a good place to live, work, and open a business, do a business, or whatever it is. But we have so much that's attractive to any number of people. With the southern, I've worked with the Convention Visitors Bureau or Visit Annapolis now. You've got the South County with the rural and the history that's there. Some of the farms, the tobacco farms and everything else. You've got the water. You've got Annapolis and the history.
Yep.
And certainly if you look up in North County, as you say, this area with the infrastructure. We've got the Arundel Mills Mall, which I understand is the largest tourist draw of anything in the state.
Yeah. And we got Laurel Racetrack that people often forget is actually it's in 3 counties.
Right.
but I think we count as the real county for them.
Have you gone out North County? Have you been out?
Oh, yeah.
So you've been all over the county from north to south and east to west?
Yeah, and I'll be a lot more. We're just getting started. We've only been in this 6 weeks. So I'll be spending a lot of time in North County.
And you've got your 7 sisters and your wife and your children all behind you? They're not looking for emancipation agreements or divorce or shopping divorce lawyers?
Yeah. No, I couldn't do this if they didn't. I have twin boys as well, 8-year-old twin boys, and they go to Davidsonville Elementary. That was one of my reservations, is that I don't want to be away from my kids a whole lot. And what I'm finding is that, there are a lot more evenings where I'm not there, but I'm making sure that I'm there when they get home for that hour where they're actually paying attention a little bit and can spend some time, and that the time that I spend with my wife and my kids is more valuable, so I'm more attentive and not doing other things on the telephone, on the computer. Well, this whole race to me is also about coming home, because this Retired Racehorse Project, the organization that I started to talk about, has become a national organization. And I was spending a fair amount of time traveling and in Kentucky and dealing with people all around, especially in Kentucky, of the horse thoroughbred industry. And I just felt like, why am I away from home? I need to be close to home, and the county is my home. And I think when you get older, I'm 56, I'm not that old, but I think when you get older, you start to want to be closer to home and serve the people that are around you. So that's part of it. But, this race is going to be, I listened to Steve Shue's interview, and he was very respectful, and he said the voters are going to have a real choice in this election. And I think I agree with that completely, that I like Steve Shue as a person. I sat down with him a year and a half before he ran, and we talked about agricultural issues, and I respect him. He's a smart guy. We definitely disagree on the way decisions should get made in the county, and the role of developers and some things like that. It's going to be a hard-fought race. We're going to run on his record, which we need to do, because it's about a re-election. But I think it's going to be a fascinating race to watch.
Well, it really is. And I think the respectful disagreement is a good way to look at this. And you've run on it. But I want to thank you very much for inviting me out to your beautiful farm down here in Davidsonville. And again, we are here with Steuart Pittman, who is running as a Democrat for county executive for Anne Arundel County. The primary is June 26th.
I believe so. I'm not too worried about the primary. Am I?
Right. This was if you don't draw anything, okay, you just need to remember to go out and vote yourself, because then you won't get on the general. But November 7th or 8th, I think it's 8th this year, is the general election, and you'll be learning a lot more about Steuart Pittman in the coming months. We've talked about his initiatives for growth, for keeping the wages and keeping the livability in the county, the fiscal discipline, and opioids. And we talked a little bit about immigration there. So find out more information at Pittman4people.com, and that is 4 spelled out, and it's PI2TsMAN. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, John. This is fun.
And that was very loud. That was Steuart Pittman from Dodon Farm out there, and we had his communications director sort of hovering over us, as well as his campaign manager, Scott Travers, who's I like Scott.
Scott's a great guy. I like Scott too.
Yeah, I gave
really sharp.
When I went in, I said I remember the first time I met Steuart was actually at Gavin's inauguration.
Oh, we should mention that Scott handled
Gavin's campaign.
Kind of stuttered that out.
I mean, I was joking again before we recorded. I said, when we first met was on Gavin's inauguration. I kind of remember Scott ducking in and taking off his Gavin for mayor and putting on the Pittman County Executive T-shirt. And
well, people always, whenever we interview any of these politicos, elected officials, or the campaigns of the elected to be, we always have their campaign managers or their communications person hovering over us. They're the ones who are watching very carefully. So it's the three of us on mic, and then there's someone always hovering in the background, kind of shooting us looks.
Right. Don't go down that road.
Or we have the timekeeper. They're always the one that are like tapping their wrist over the shoulder of whomever we're interviewing.
Well, usually it is. Or if, and we have never gotten really uncomfortable, but if something were to get uncomfortable, I'm sure that they would figure a way to get out of that.
Yeah, we never have actually. Come to think of it, we've never gotten to do waters that were dangerous that people were glaring at us.
That's not our thing, though.
No, I don't want to. It's a small town, and these people can do stuff to me.
I'll tell you, one thing that was very interesting in this conversation was Steuart's take on the immigration. Now, when I came out of the Steve Shue interview, I was all aboard. 2 immigration issues, and Steve took a lot of time to explain it in the episode. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen to it. It's the episode prior to this one. He said we've got 2 programs, and they've got numbers, and I'm not even going to bother them because I know I'll screw them up. One is an unused portion of the jail up at Ordnance Road that holds ICE detainees. So ICE, which is what Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, has collected, and again, we'll just use this as a generic term, an illegal alien, and brought them here for holding for potential deportation or whatever legal process needs to go. And this is the place that they're holding them.
Right. It's a processing center.
Yeah. And it's not, I mean, we're not, we are obviously being reimbursed for our time to hold them there, but we're not arresting them. We're not doing anything. It's just sort of, it's kind of like a hotel.
We have the space.
Yeah, I mean, it's using surplus space. I get that. I'm all on board that. The other program was that existing officers within the correctional officers would be able to talk to incoming inmates and just through interviewing and interacting with them, have training that's provided by the feds to be able to determine if they may or may not be here illegally. I was saying, okay, well, this is fine. And they said that if they feel they're here illegally, they can notify ICE, and ICE can make the decision. It's ICE's decision whether they want to say, yeah, no, we're not interested, or, oh, yeah, that's, a big guy that we want to get. Came out of the Shue interview, and I said, that's very reasonable. Pittman kind of has me turned around a little bit.
How so?
Well, I mean, he was talking about it. He said that, okay, and as I thought about it, let's say I am here undocumented or illegally, and I'm involved in a fracas. Fracas?
Can you explain the fracas, sir?
Yeah. There's a fight in a bar, just a random bar. We'll call it the Ebb Tide, out in the parking lot. And all of a sudden the police come, and I am arrested for assaulting a woman.
Or disorderly conduct. Let's make it easy.
Okay. So there I am. I'm up in Ordnance Road, and I am there illegally. I've been arrested for this disorderly conduct. And they're, unbeknownst to me, I mean, they're just interacting with me, and they're making the determinations. And maybe I say, oh, yeah, I was never treated like this at home, or, something like that. I don't know what the criteria would be, but then all of a sudden, they say, yeah, we think he's here illegally. And they say, hey, ICE, we got this guy, John Fernay. And they're like, okay, well, maybe we'll pick him up. So then we go through the judicial process, and maybe the video camera at the Ebb Tide shows that I was near the fight, but I never throw a punch.
So you should have never been arrested in the first place.
Right. It was and that happens bad arrests happen all the time. That's why we've got courts. That's why we've got
judges. If I had a nickel, yeah.
And
every time I got arrested.
But all of a sudden, now I have been set free from that charge that brought me there. But now I'm potentially being detained by ICE. And what Steuart was saying was that while they're at the county jail, for the most part, they haven't been charged. They've been charged, but they haven't been tried yet.
Right.
Unless they've got an 18-month jail sentence. I think that's the max that you can do in a county jail. Otherwise, you go to a state prison or to a federal prison.
Right.
And that makes sense to me then.
Well, that you think that it's unfair?
Correct.
Well, so the argument against that would be, let's say that you're John Fernay, you are a citizen, and you get picked up for the same thing. Everything is the same. Okay.
Right.
But you have an outstanding warrant for your arrest for something else. So even though you shouldn't have been picked up or anything.
Now you're going to change my mind back again.
So, no, I mean, look, I have some pretty strong thoughts about the folks who are here, especially the Salvadorians, because I know a lot of them personally. And
okay, but you talk about it, and you already have a warrant out for you,
right?
Isn't that sort of like? But in my situation,
every attorney who's listening to this right now, their head's exploding. By the way,
let's say that. Isn't it almost saying like I think you have an outstanding warrant without knowing?
Well, no, because you would do the check anyway. Like, let's say, so I get pulled over, for I blow a stop sign, which is that happens. And I get pulled over, they're going to run my plates, and they're going to run me to see if I have any outstanding warrants or, if I have suspended. So they do that anyway, so that's part of, that doesn't violate due process because they have reasonable cause at that point to suspect that, that I have committed an infraction or I'm accused of committing an infraction. So, they can check on me. So I really don't have a problem with that really. But let's say that they pull me over. Let's say that they pull me over and there's no reason to pull me over. But when they search my car, they say, "Can I search your car?" And they don't ask me. They go into my car. They had no reason to pull me over, but they pull me over and they find coke or something in there and they charge me with that. Well, theoretically, I think if you take that to court, he'll be thrown out because there was no reason to pull me over in the first place. You had no probable cause. So what do they call that? Fruit from the poison tree or whatever the hell it is. Whatever
right.
Law and order phrase I can throw out there. But I think it's a little different with immigration because we're not talking about. I don't think it's a criminal. It's a criminal violation per se. I mean, I think it's something completely different. Immigration law is very different than criminal law and civil law. So I don't think, even though that they are afforded due process with a crime they commit in the country, I don't think they're protected from deportation at any time because they're not supposed to be here in the first place, no matter how you view it. Yeah. I think that's how it goes.
Yeah, I can see it.
But this is going to be a hot button issue in all the elections. Crime was a hot button issue in the last election, which was ridiculous because we are at an all-time low when it comes to crime. But I think immigration, we're at net zero, so more people are leaving than coming into the country. But it's one of those manufactured things that's going to be big.
I think it was very interesting, though, to see how he's looking to attack this. I mean, obviously, he's got this, I think he said 13 separate zones in the county, and he really wants to work. He's going back to his organizer roots, gather people and wanting to talk to people and find out what the issues are for that section of South County.
Yeah, we're very diverse.
The section of West County.
We're a very diverse county, and not all counties are like that. Because if you go to the Eastern Shore, those counties are pretty much the same. You go to Western Maryland, those counties are pretty much the same. But here we have a very densely populated urban area, and then we have that goes right into the bucolic hills of South County, and so there's some very unique needs amongst the citizenry that is very different.
And he's going to be and I know that county executive has sort of, I don't want to say backtracked, but he's laid out that he does not want to have more urban growth except in specific areas that are basically the areas that already are. Pittman is going to be harping on that as well.
Well, South County, they fight that tooth and nail no matter what. I mean, you couldn't even get that salt storage thing down there. Remember that?
That's right.
They tried to put that salt storage unit down in Davidsonville, and they flipped out, and it didn't happen.
Yep.
Look, you say Eastport, we like it this way. That's nothing compared to South County.
No, very, very fascinating, and I would like to get back with actually both county executive and Pittman as we get along into the into the campaign. Just see where it is, see what the thing is. I think Steuart really has the backing of the surge, resist,
right.
Offshoots of the march from last year.
Right.
And I think, and I told the county executive, I think that's a huge thing that you need to, look out for.
He's got to watch out for his own central committee.
Yeah, true. True.
They're going to trip over their own feet again.
But yeah, so very interesting with Steuart Pittman to find out more. I mean, it's pittmanforpeople.com. And before you wrap up, I just wanted to say something a little personal here. We lost just a very special person earlier this week in Eddie McGowan. And if anybody doesn't know who Eddie McGowan is, he is the guy that dreamt up the Irish Festival. He was the pretty boy in the Rovers, or Dublin 5, as they became to call. I mean, it was. I always said that Ray Murphy was the lead singer and the guitarist, and Ray had the voice, but Eddie brought the crowd.
Yeah,
and
charismatic guy.
He is. I mean, he was a living, breathing, walking, talking party. Unfortunately, he has been battling ALS for
4 years,
almost 4 years.
Yeah,
and it, you can't beat it. And
no.
His wife said that, we tried to fight ALS, and ALS, as it always does, won.
But he really did. I've seen people go in just a matter of months. And a good friend of mine passed away from it, who reminded me a lot of Eddie, frankly. 4 years is just unbelievable. And he fought it tooth and nail.
He did. He actually was at a Super Bowl party the evening before he died. Or not at a Super Bowl party. They had a Super Bowl party at his house the night before he passed away. And, I mean, he did the Annapolis Speedo run. So he's the one, really? He's the one that came up with, like, hey, let's get in a Speedo and run around in Annapolis in the snow. And I always laughed. I thought that was so funny because the city always was like, dude, you need to get a permit for this stuff. And he's like, what? And they're like, no, you need to pull a permit. You need to get insurance and all that kind of stuff. He says, it's just a bunch of friends getting together. And we just happen to go out for a stroll at the same time, wearing the same stuff. And it's, you know.
And we have some flyers promoting it.
Yeah, we charge to get in. But he's given, I don't know how many thousands of toys, because that's a fundraiser for Toys for Tots. And he gathers toys for that. And the Irish Festival, I know, has given over $200,000 to local charities.
And that's the best festival, hands down. Not to insult anyone else, but that is the best festival. It is fantastic.
And I think this year will be very special. I think it's a legacy that he's going to leave behind, along with his wonderful wife and his 3 wonderful kids. But so, you know, go to the Irish Festival. It's going to happen on June 1st and 2nd, I guess. And this isn't a plug for them, but just think about that, and let's try to see if we can make it the best one that we've ever had. And to Eddie McGowan, if you listen to podcasts up in the up in the sky, I'm so glad that you're out of pain.
Yeah,
and hopefully they've got good beer up there, because that would suck.
Now, speaking of beer, and on a happier note, I guess we're gonna have another drinking podcast.
Yes,
I love drinking podcasts; they're my favorite, and we have a very special guest.
Oh, we do.
We have a very special guest,
right? Ooh, and if we get the very special guest drunk, that could be entertaining.
Yes. I will do my best. It is going to be Scotty Mack, our old friend Scotty Mack.
The Godfather.
The Godfather of Annapolis podcasting. We have not had him on the podcast for the last year and a half, and I know he's seething about it. So we're going to say, and we say that because every guest that he has on his podcast is a very special guest. So we're going to have a very special guest in Scotty Mack.
And we're going to start
Mac Mullen.
We're going to start off with that.
Yeah. And he's not, well, he's going to listen to this and he's going to know. And you know the best thing is that he will listen to it and he won't be able to text us criticism because he's going to be a part of it.
No.
So I will have 1 week without the critical text.
That would be
text,
great.
You know. So it's just going to be 3 idiots sitting around drinking and yapping.
And he just confirmed that to me on text. So we're going to record that, and we'll have to figure out who's going to get the beer and what kind, and go
Guinness.
from there.
My drinking podcast are always Guinness.
All right. Well, make sure that you go to iTunes or Apple Podcasts and give us a rating. That is very important, and it only takes a minute. So if you're on Apple, in the Apple environment, just do it. Go there, click a 5-star rating or a 4-star or whatever it is you feel.
The review's better, though.
Same thing wherever you listen to it. Give us a rating, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, and so you can find us on Google Play, too. You can find us, so you can fire up the old Alexa. You can find us on Facebook. We have a group, and we have a page. You can find us on the Twitters. We are at MD Crabs Podcast. I've never gotten that right in all the times we've done this.
78 episodes.
Yep. And then, of course, you've got the Annapolis Daily Briefing, which in all honesty, I do listen to that every morning on my Alexa. So I go into my skills and I activated the Annapolis skill. And so I just say, Alexa, play my Annapolis morning update and daily briefing, rather.
Yeah.
And boom, there it is. I listen to it every morning, 10 minutes.
It's kind of fun. It's getting better.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
info@themarylandcrabs.com, and of course that's the website as well, themarylandcrabs.com. We always appreciate feedback, suggestions, guest ideas, all sorts of things like that. Yeah, so all right, well, that's it for the week. We will be back next week with Scotty Mack,
a very special guest.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.